Growing up, I was often doubtful of the advice I was given to the point of absurdity. Sometimes this worked out for me, like when a friend of mine claimed drinking Mountain Dew lowered your sperm count, and I, interested and with a keen mind for scientific observations and process, said that's obviously not true. And as we did with all our disagreements in those days, we proceeded to Google it, and to both of our surprise, I was right. 1 point Colin. Other times, though, this kind of ingrained skepticism would eventually bite me in the ass. This has happened more times than I can count, to the point where explaining all of them in one video would exceed YouTube's duration limits. But I also refrain from giving an example because a lot of them were brief, passing nuggets of wisdom that were very easy to miss. As such, I have forgotten most of them. One that I did not forget, however, was this. Change is inevitable. It's better to embrace it and ride the wave than it is to fight the tide. When I was younger, I hated this quote. In a childish sense, I still do. I have a strong inherent dislike towards concepts of fate and predetermined outcomes, although I will acknowledge I think that quote is a little more complex than just talking about fate. But to go on a tangent, fate to me means that all evil was destined to be evil and all good was destined to be good. We're all effectively underpaid and overworked thespians, in other words, thespians, who are trotted out on stage from dawn till dusk, some with incurable maladies, some destined to die at the age of 2, because that's just how fate decided it, okay? We're all meant to simply play our little parts, recite our scripts, then keel over and die, remembered forever for the deeds we ourselves never decided to do. I don't know. I don't know about you, but I choose to ignore that B-movie plot of a philosophical worldview, and instead determine, unequivocally and scientifically, that the idea of fate sucks eggs. The only time I like the idea of fate is when these preordained outcomes are being manipulated, like in Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning. And to be clear, no, this is not a video about Kingdoms of Amalur, although, now that I mention it, I will probably make that video at some point. But anyway, the only time fate is even remotely cool is when it's being bent over big style by some magical bullshit that manipulates it to the point of no longer being fate. Such as in Kingdoms of Amalur, where your unique ability to manipulate the strands of fate allows you to make massive and long-lasting changes to the areas and characters you encounter. So when I was growing up, and I heard that change was inevitable, that I would have to encounter hardship, and it would be better to simply encounter it with grace, rather than go down kicking and screaming, I thought, give me the down low on this kicking and screaming business. I never really thought of myself as stubborn, but looking back, I absolutely was. Anyway, I decided I didn't want to change. I was on that Peter Pan grind set, looking for Lost Boy applications, as you do. But maybe I hadn't thought far enough ahead, because that piece of advice I was given was clearly a warning. Like, a more perceptive mind than mine, addled as it was at the time by atheistic elitism and sperm-hampering Mountain Dew, might have recognized the very unsubtle foreshadowing that lurks in almost all of the advice you are offered growing up. Never mind the warnings, never mind the signposts with the big red skull and crossbones, never mind the corpses and carnage and viscera. I am Brian Pasternak, and I have got a witch-hunting guidebook to hunt down in this fucking hellhole. Consequences be absolutely shat on. Except, in my broke-ass metaphor, Brian Pasternak is actually me, and the witch-hunting guidebook I'm searching for is actually the rejection of my own perfectly healthy journey of self-guided growth. When we're forced to change, we usually improve. Not always. Just look into my eyes, the eyes of a person who recently underwent change. Tell me what you see. Anyway, so the end result is not always positive. clearly, but I've found, at least anecdotally, in my own experience and in that of many of my friends, unwanted change is often the most transformative and positive in the long run. Things we love can sometimes be hurting us without our realizing it. Habits we form are sometimes destructive even though we find ourselves drawn to them. But when something in life grabs our attention away from those habits and things, forces us to abandon them or forever be this person we never want to be, this person we can't believe we've been for all this time, that's the change that I've found to be the juiciest, yummiest, most gooeyest change of them all. And sometimes, whether we're the age I was when I realized I had resisted, or whether we're a full-grown adult, we will fight tooth and nail against those changes when they arrive. But I think one's ability to endure change and adapt is in some ways a mark of their character. There is only a certain reasonable limit any one person can be expected to endure, of course, but some hardship should be anticipated. In this world, there are some who resent having to adapt or refuse to try altogether, entering a sort of stagnancy for much of their lives, even though in some cases they're just a husk of what they once were, like a hermit crab's shell that's shed its own shell. And I'm not saying this to talk down to these people. I understand that life simply is not fair 99% of the time. Worse, the world is full of a peanut gallery of uncaring, uncouth jerkwads who exploit your misery and unfortunate life to pontificate on your laziness and that of those in similar economic standing to you, essentially standing on your back and using you as a soapbox. So I'm not here to judge anyone. We have enough political parties for that. I bring all this up because I feel I have not been spared any hits from the forced change rod. Whoever's wielding that thing might have it out for me, and I respectfully ask that they stop before it gives me a concussion. I was extremely religious, then I was extremely not religious, then I got really sad for a while, and then I was kind of stable, then I got engaged, and then I was not engaged. I am in a constant state of flux, and I am not sure how long I've ever just been one single, consistent person. So I understand, change sucks. The process of metamorphosis is gradual and painful, and more often than not, you don't feel like you're turning into a beautiful butterfly. You instead feel like your mind is in a perpetual civil war, with numerous feuding factions fighting to destroy the largest possible quantity of your gray matter. I have willfully undergone changes, even major ones in the past, but the vast majority of them were brought on by external forces. I don't know the statistics on this, and I am way too far into this script to change gears now, so I'm going to assume I am correct when I say that most changes are probably external. I very rarely hear about major changes people have decided to forcibly make themselves undergo, but I hear all the fucking time about this terrible life event and that. So many tragedies, an endless spinning wheel heaped with human shit and broken glass that forces vaguely human-shaped coal into a sparkling diamond of slightly more human-shaped coal. Not quite a diamond because who's perfect anyway. Although I grew up somewhat detesting the idea, this strange necessity to adapt and change has started to fascinate me in recent years, even as it throttles me further and further into the pits of despair. Even as everything I have ever known and loved crumbled to ash in my hands, only to immediately fall through my fingers directly into my open eyes. I still knew I had to improve. I knew deep down through the pain and discomfort that this wasn't going to be the end, because if it was, the end result was being a bitter wreck of a person. So I know, well, gonna have to get over this, right? Change is gonna have to happen. That's what's fascinated me about it, is change is kind of your only option at a certain point. Circumstances will arise when your current fashion of doing things is gonna fail you. You can either ignore it, continue failing and pretending you're content with that, or you can adapt. And again, I'm not trying to judge anyone here. This is purely based off my own life experience. Stop being so sensitive. Holy shit. I was doing customer service shit one night, making that green, and there was a particular customer who came in who was clearly in a bad way. He looked dead inside. His eyelids were droopy. His stare was unfocused and distant. And when he talked, you could hear a complete lack of passion. In fairness, he was slightly drunk. But I get to talking with this man, and it does not take long for him to explain that his wife of 30 years is leaving him, he can't believe it, he doesn't want it to happen, and I'm just kind of sitting there consoling the guy. And then he says to me, "I've never lost before. I never lose in life. and I'm not going to lose now. I know people who will make her regret this. And as I sat there, nodding my head in fear to this delusional elderly man who truly believed he'd lived 80 years of utter perfection, who somehow believed he had walked this earth free of failure or sin for all that time, I realized that this was the end result of a person who refuses to change. How often has he doubted himself? Has he questioned whether he's treating his loved ones with enough respect? Or does he blame them and claim his perpetual perfection clears him of any responsibility towards them? These aren't accusations, I'm genuinely curious. But the thing is, these aren't questions I have to ask myself about most people. If you've planted that seed of doubt in my mind, we probably had a terrible first impression, or you're a notably sad person. But hey, that's all the motivation I will ever need to take unexpected and unwanted life changes on the chin. Because the alternative to moving on and redefining what it means to be you is to devolve into a pitiful husk of who you once were, clinging desperately to the hope you might reclaim what you've lost. I will always encourage you, and anyone, to instead remember that you're not your thoughts, you're not your expectations of yourself, you're your actions and your words. And actions and words can always be changed to support a version of you that you want to see in the world you live in. This has been Colin. I like video games. And thanks for watching. Those of you with the channel for a bit now know I write. That's what I do. I got a dark fantasy book about a royal bastard of a royal family who wants to kill his dad. Go check it out. There's also a short story collection of fantasy stories coming out in July at the earliest. I'm very excited. I've almost got the cover art all squared away. All the stories are edited and formatted. All we need is that cover art, and this thing's going out there to you guys. It's going to be very affordable. That's the goal with the short stories, so don't worry if price is an issue. Anyway, I want to thank everyone so much for watching again. It's been great. I really appreciate the opportunity to come up here and be on my soapbox for a little while. You ready to go off, Steve? We good?
Yeah?
Okay, cool. So yeah, Steve's been a bit real champ, letting me kind of pontificate about the shit he goes through. Fuck Steve, though, am I right? So, the end result is not always positive. Clearly. So...